right, good morning, everyone. Can everybody hear me? Do we need to talk louder? Should I pipe it down a little bit? Okay, I have a naturally booming voice. I'm sorry, I apologize. As Julie said, I'm David Osagian. I'm a senior project manager, work for Mastardi Platt. We're an environmental consulting company located in Elmhurst, Illinois. I've been a member of IMA for a number of years now. I'm happy to do these presentations. I'm here, my job here is to try to educate you, try to pass on some of the knowledge I have to all of you. Today's topics are primarily on safety, OSHA-related compliance. Who here is an OSHA manager, safety manager? 1, 2, 3, 4? Okay, so I can't totally baffle you with BS. I have to try to show you how truly intelligent I am. Okay, so try not to catch me in any lies. I appreciate it if you can do that for me. All right, today's topics. We have new reporting requirements as well as the top 10 hit list from last year. All right, without further ado, the old reporting requirements. In the years past, okay, if there was an incident at the facility that resulted in a fatality to any of your individuals, work-related fatality, you had to report it to OSHA within 8 hours. If you had a catastrophe that happened at the facility, and a fatality is defined as if you have 3 or more people who are injured in the same workplace-related accident, incident, or chemical exposure that resulted in them going to the hospital, being inpatient, not just treated at the emergency room and released, but inpatient and receiving some advanced medical treatment, you had to report it to OSHA. Again, you had 8 hours to report that. All right, those are the old reporting requirements. The preferred way to report it to OSHA is called the 800 number. You know, the 1-800-321-4762 or OSHA, right? That's what they want you to do. If you, for some reason you can't get a hold of them, but you're right down the street from an area OSHA office like the one in North Aurora, you could go there as well. That was considered acceptable. In a pinch, if you wanted to, if you had to, you could email them a notification, but they really didn't want that. And to be honest, I don't know who you're going to notify via email. I don't have just oodles of people at OSHA, their email addresses. I have like 1 or 2 people in North Aurora, and that's about it. So the best bet was to call OSHA, call the phone number. One thing you're guaranteed, if you have a workplace-related fatality or if you have a workplace-related catastrophe, you will have an investigation. Guaranteed. It's in the statutes. They have to do an investigation. No ifs, ands, or buts, no maybes. They will be there. And they will be calling you within a day or 2 to schedule something. All right, new reporting requirements as of January 1st. The rules have changed somewhat. All right, as you can see if my pointer works here. You can't really see it. Work-related fatality, you still have the same rule there, no different. Work-related fatality, you've got 8 hours to notify OSHA. Again, phone number is the preferred way of doing it. The new thing here, in the past, it was 3 or more people inpatient hospitalization. Nowadays, as of January 1st, 1 person. You have 1 person slip and fall, break their leg, have to go to the hospital, maybe get emergency surgery, you have to call OSHA. Something else that's new, if you have an employee that has an amputation, any body part is amputated, all right? So if you have somebody that sticks their hand too close to a lathe or something like that, or a milling machine, and gets part of their finger chopped off or the whole hand chopped off, you've got to notify OSHA. You get somebody that's a little too close to maybe some corrosive materials and has acid splashed in their eye and they go blinded in the eye, or the eye gets poked out or damaged, you have to notify OSHA. As you can see, the hospitalization, amputation, and loss of an eye, you get a little bit longer time. You get 24 hours to report that. All right, so you have a little bit more time to think about what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. And like the old rules, if you report anything to OSHA along these lines, guaranteed you will have an investigation. They will be there. It's in the statute. They have to do the investigation. All right, methods are reported. Again, the preferred method of reporting is to call the 800 number. All right, they want you to do that. That's the number you want to emblazon in your memory banks. Remember that number, 1-800-321-OSHA. All right. If you can't get a hold of that number for some reason, and they're open 24/7, 365, but if you can't, you can always call one of the area OSHA offices. You know, the one in North Aurora. I think there's one in Des Plaines, one up on the north side, and there's a couple of them throughout central Illinois. If you can't get a hold of them, the third option here, because now OSHA has joined the 21st century, they now have a website. Well, the OSHA.gov website has always existed for a number of years, but now they have a link on the website to provide you with online reporting. A lot of people like this option because now they have some kind of documentation to prove I called OSHA. Because what if you call OSHA, the 800 number, and say, yeah, I talked to Joe Smith at OSHA in Washington, D.C., I reported it, he gave me a case number, and I'm good to go. But what if the person at the OSHA office loses their paperwork? And they say, well, you never documented. Well, you don't have any proof that you called. You know, what proof do you have that you made a phone call? Well, nobody has that proof. I did. And that's all I can say. I did. Here's my word of honor. I did. But I don't have any proof for it. If you go on the website, I have not having done it myself yet, I presume that if you get on here, that they're going to give you something that you can download or print off to prove that you've actually done it. So it's documentation. And as you all know, documentation is the key. You have to document it. If you didn't document it, it didn't exist. All right. So all that said, on Friday, that's the note I got when I went on the website to do it, just to see what it looked like. Still coming soon. So as of Friday, it didn't exist yet. It should be existing sometime in the middle of this month. So has anybody been on this lately? Nobody? All right. Again, by today's the 15th, so it may be in operation now. I don't know. I'm just going to go on just to see what it looks like and kind of nose around a little bit and see what you have to do to report. But it's right on the OSHA.gov website. All right. So, talked a lot about things like what is work-related. You know, if you have a work-related fatality, you have to report it. A work-related amputation or somebody poking their eye out, you have to report it. So what exactly is work-related? Well, the exact definition straight out of OSHA 1904 point, I think it was 3.2, talks about an injury or illness is work-related if the event or exposure in the work environment either caused or contributed to the resulting condition or significantly aggravated some kind of pre-existing condition. So basically, if you're in the work environment, if you're at the shop, you're in your factory, and there's an accident or incident, and somebody is injured, that's work-related. Right? If they are commuting, if they're in your work vehicle, say you guys or ladies own a fleet of trucks, your employees driving out to the job site to do a job, that's considered the work environment, that's work-related. Right? Work-relatedness is always presumed for any accident or incident that happens in the work environment. All right? There are some exceptions to the rule where work-relatedness doesn't necessarily apply. All right? I don't know, can everybody read these exceptions? I do not have these memorized, so I'm just going to kind of summarize what each one says. The first exception, why something may not be considered work-related. And if it's not work-related, it's not reportable. All right? An accident or incident is not considered reportable, it's an exception, if the employee is present as a member of the general public. Meaning they're off to work hours, perhaps this is their day off, and it's daddy bring a daughter to work day. You know, daddy shows up with his daughter, he's walking around, he trips over something and he's injured, he breaks a leg or something like that. Well, you know what? Yes, he's an employee, and yes, it happened in the work environment, but daddy is not there as a member of the workforce today. Daddy is here on his day off with his daughter. He is no different than if some stranger off the street or a visitor to the facility came in and had an accident, right? It's not recordable. It's not reportable to you. Second exception, why something would not be considered work-related and hence not reportable, if you have symptoms that surface at work but result solely from a non-work-related illness or incident. Right? I'll give you an example. Our company's accountant, our HR manager, last year had the flu. And this was back in early December. He had a nasty flu. He was out for a couple of days. Well, he had a big report that was coming due, so he had to get to the office. He still didn't feel that good. In fact, he was still kind of nasty, all the nasty symptoms that goes with the flu, but he showed up for work anyway. He did his job, and at the end of the day, it was a Friday, he went in to talk to the company owner to make his final reports, you know, whatever it is that he does, right? So he's standing in the office, in the doorway, waiting to get the guy's attention. He was on the phone, and next thing you know, you hear this big thud. What was that? Well, it was this guy. He passed out. He fell flat on his back, laying there. You know, everybody jumped up. Oh my gosh, what happened? What happened? They go running over there, call 911. Ambulance crew shows up. They take him to the hospital. They give him an MRI. They do a lot of different this and that type of thing, determine what it was that happened. Determine he's fine, right? So at first, we put it on the OSHA 301 log, the OSHA 300 log, and said this is a recordable incident. Certainly happened here. He received basic treatment beyond basic first aid. He had an MRI. He got some prescription medication and everything else. But then we started looking at it. Well, wait a minute. What caused him to pass out? Was it something in the workplace? The answer is no. He was just standing there. He was doing absolutely nothing, just standing there and breathing. What caused it was him having a flu. He was sick. So it was symptoms that surfaced at work from a pre-existing medical condition. So that is not considered recordable incident either. All right. Number 3, results solely from voluntary participation in a wellness program or recreational activities. You have a company picnic, and you have a softball game. Somebody's sliding into home plate, safe, but they also wrench their knee while they're doing it. Well, that's unfortunate, and yeah, it's a work-related function, but it's not work-related as far as OSHA recordable incidents. So hence, it's exempt. You don't have to report that incident. Number 4, eating, drinking, or preparing food for personal consumption. If they decide to pack a lunch, they got the egg salad sandwich, they throw it in their car on Friday, and they forget to take it out of the car. It's the middle of July, and the egg salad sandwich just sits there and festers for Saturday, Sunday. Come Monday, the employee gets in the car again and goes, oh, my sandwich, cool. Grabs it and eats it for lunch. Well, then has food poisoning, has to go to the hospital, the emergency room, and treated for E. coli poisoning, all right? That's not work-related. It happened in the workplace, but the employee did it to themselves. They made their own food. Sidebar to that, if you, the employer, are providing a meal for your employees, you cater it in, and somebody gets food poisoning from that, that is considered work-related, because then you, the employer, are providing for the employees, right? If they give it to themselves, it's not reportable. Number 5, employee doing personal tasks unrelated to the employment, outside your normal working hours. If you're doing something, say you're done for the workday, you're just hanging out, you're BSing with your friends, and again, you slip and fall on the locker room floor and you twist an ankle. It happened at work, but it's not work-related because it's not during working hours. You're no longer being paid by your employer. Number 6, employee personal grooming, self-medication for some non-work-related condition or intentionally self-inflicted. Right? You try to commit suicide, you're depressed, you try to do it, you get rushed off the emergency room, you're not successful. It's not recordable because that's a self-inflicted injury. It's not something that somebody did to you, it's something you did to yourself. That doesn't count. That's not recordable. It's unfortunate, but it's not recordable. Number 7, motor vehicle accident, which occurs on the company parking lot. Again, the company, this is not talking about driving a work vehicle during the middle of the workday to a client site, because that is recordable. I'm talking about the workday's done, your hourly people have punched out, they're done BSing in the locker room, they've gone out, and they've started to get in their own cars, and there's 2 cars, maybe the driveway is slippery, 2 cars collide, boom, there's an accident, somebody has to go to the emergency room. Not a recordable incident. It happened on your property, but it's not recordable because it's after working hours, right? Driving their own personal vehicles. If you get a sick, and the illness is the common cold or flu, you get people like my boss. My boss, Britt will just hypothetically say his name is, and this Britt character likes to come to work when he's sick. He is the ultimate workaholic. He is incredibly dedicated. He's very, very good at his job. But by gosh, come heck or high water, he is going to appear. He is going to be there whether he's sick or not. And he likes to do it when he's sick. He'll come up there when he's coughing and gasping for breath and everything else, and the mucus is running out of his nose, and he's sneezing and everything like that. He loves to reach out. Oh, let me touch your keyboard for me. Let me do this. Let me borrow your pen. It's like, nah. We all have people like this, unfortunately. They're the great workaholics of the world, but unfortunately they also are the typhoid Marys of the world. Right? You're a pain to be around when they're sick. Right? If this person comes to work and they get you sick, that's not a recordable incident. You could have caught a cold or a flu anywhere. It's more serious diseases like AIDS, HIV, something like that, or brucellosis or TB, things like that. You catch them at work, yeah, those are considered recordable. But the common cold or the common flu, no, that's not, because you can get that anywhere. The last exception for recordable incident, mental illness. Just because work drives you crazy doesn't mean it's work related, doesn't mean it's recordable, all right? Unless the doctor or psychiatrist says otherwise. All right, a lot of people say, hey, I'm exempt. No, I don't have to keep OSHA record keeping. What about me? Do I have to record all these new things? Do these new rules apply to me? And the answer is yes and no. Right? And exempt employees are somebody, usually it's in some low hazard industry. One of the handouts I had sitting up here, hopefully everybody got, had a listing of all the what OSHA considers low hazard industries. If you find yourself in that industry, you're exempt from OSHA record keeping. You do not have to maintain the OSHA 300 log or post the 300A annual summary on February 1st. What makes you exempt is you are listed by what's known as your standard industrial classification or your SIC code. If your SIC code was listed on that list, you're exempt from reporting and record keeping. I'm sorry. Also, if you're a small employer, if you have 10 or fewer employees, including yourself, you're exempt. You do not have to maintain OSHA record logs. unless OSHA has sent you a letter or come to you in person, or the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics through the Department of Labor has said, hey, we would like you to maintain records. We know you only have 6 employees, or we know you have an SIC code that puts you on the exempt list. We want you to do it anyway. Because maybe we've been to your facility in the past and we've seen certain incidents. We want to make sure you're always recording these things. All right? So if they've been told you have to, then you do. Otherwise, you're exempt. All right. One of the changes, January 1st, SIC codes, Standard Industrial Classification Codes, been around since the, somebody help me, 70s? 60s? Anybody want to venture a guess on that one? I don't know. All right. Those are being done away with. They still exist, but the replacement now is something called the NAICS, the North American Industrial Classification System. The NAICS is basically a 6-digit code, does the same thing as SIC. Okay, it's just a little bit longer code, gives a little bit more information. Right? So the exemptions are now based on NAICS. So if you look at that list I gave you, that's what's actually listed on there. Now it's important, if your facility was exempt in the past, say you were an accounting firm or an insurance provider, you were probably exempt. You didn't have to maintain the records. When OSHA redid that list, some of these exemptions went by the wayside. So maybe in the past you were exempt, but maybe now as of January 1st, you're not exempt. Now you have to start keeping records. All right? Likewise, maybe you were keeping records in 2014, but now you're exempt. Right? So you need to make sure you pay attention to that and follow the rules accordingly. If you were following the OSHA record-keeping rules and now you're exempt, all that means is you don't have to publish the 300A on February 1st. You're exempt from that. All right. Now, even if you're exempt from maintaining injury and illness records, you're not exempt. Nobody is exempt if you have a work-related fatality, amputation, one person in the hospital, or person with a loss of an eye. Nobody is exempt from that. Every single person here in this room, if you work for somebody or you're self-employed, you have to follow that rule. All right, that concludes the first section of my thing. This was the new reporting requirements. The second half, the double feature, lucky you, is what's known as the OSHA Top 10 Violations of 2014. All right, starting off the list at number 10. All right. Electrical general requirements. This is section 1910.303. In 2014, there was 2,056 violations. Now, these violations, this is strictly federal, OSHA federal. So they're not the state plan states. State plan states like Indiana, for instance, they have their own state OSHA. State of Illinois is a pseudo state plan state. State of Illinois has OSHA requirements and OSHA rules for state employees, and I believe federal employees fall under that guise as well in the state of Illinois. But everybody else, the vast majority of us, don't. The rest of us in the state of Illinois all follow the federal guidelines. All right, so if these statistics here are strictly federal that I'm giving you right here. All right, so the electrical violations, the number 10 most common violation you might see in the workplace. Now, what can you do to prevent that from happening? Well, some tips, what I'm going to call Compliance 101. Just give you a few bullet points on each of these 10 things on the hit list, things you could be looking at your facility to try to help you. It's not a be-all and end-all, it's not the panacea of the solution, but it is something to get you going in the right direction. All right, the first thing you could do is make sure you label your transformers, switches, circuit breaker panels, and whatnot in accordance with NFPA 70E. That's the arc flash standard, right? Arc flash standard basically says thou shalt post signs on your electrical circuit panels and circuit breakers. Anything where the outermost guarding is going to be removed and expose the innermost guts, the electrical guts of the material of the machine. You have to have signs posted that talk about minimum approach distance, talks about proper PPE, arc flash warnings, and so on. Right? That has to be posted. All right, make sure you maintain the adequate space in all sides. Anytime you have a transformer or electrical circuit panel, you have to make sure you maintain 36 inches of space in front of and to either side of the circuit breaker panel. Right? Nothing can be stored in that 36 inches of space. Where the panel is sitting on a wall, you can have 2 or 3 circuit panels in a row, that's okay. OSHA doesn't care what's mounted on the wall or flat on the wall or behind it. It doesn't matter there. Anything in front of, to either side of, below it, or above it, you have to have 36 inches of free space. Which means Stop storing the mop bucket directly underneath the circuit breaker panel. Transformers, while yes, they are a nice flat surface, they are not designed to hold pop cans or aerosol cans. All right? Next one on that, ensure lockout tagout anytime you're working on electrical equipment. Lockout tagout is used, of course, to protect you when you're working on electrical equipment or anything with hazardous energy source. Last one on that one, talking about ensure electrically live parts are guarded. All right? Guarding protects you when you're not doing maintenance. Lockout tagout is designed to protect you when you're doing repair, you're doing maintenance, and the guards are removed and you have to see the internal guts of the machine. Lockout tagout provides protection for your employees at that time. Machine guards protect you when the lockout tagout is not in existence, when you're not doing repair, when you're just doing normal, routine operation of that equipment. Make sure the guards have not been defeated. All right, number 9 on the list, 9th most common violation in 2014 was, talking to the machine guarding, 1910.212. Here you had 2,200 violations. All right, compliance 101, what can you do for machine guarding? And I don't think my cool little graphic here only works with me doing it live, unfortunately. Guards should be provided to protect employees from hazards created by point of operation, ingoing nip points, rotating parts, rotating barrels like this, flying chips, and sparks. All right. I went into this facility 3-4 years ago. I saw this rotating barrel. This barrel is essentially like a 55-gallon drum. Think of like a gigantic paint mixer. Right? And that's what they use it for, was mixing coating materials. No guards around there whatsoever. Just totally open. Anybody walking by could walk by, snag their arm on it, something. And it's not rotating very quickly, as you noticed. But with all the torque that that electrical motor has on that thing, it's going to make your body doing somersaults. You are not going to stop that thing from rotating, a little 5-horse motor or whatever it is that's moving that thing. Right? That needs to be guarded. You need to provide protection on all 4 sides around it so that nobody can get in too close to touch the moving part. Guards have to be posted in place so that you guard up to a minimum from the floor up to the ceiling of 7 feet. Does 7 feet sound like a lot from the floor up? Does that sound pretty good or sufficient? Anybody? Okay, 7 feet is minimum compliance. I firmly believe one of the 7 dwarves back in 1971 when OSHA was created must have been in charge of the guarding requirement that said 7 feet. 7 feet is what we'll guard to. For me, 7 feet is, oh, that's up in the sky somewhere. That certainly should be adequate. Well, let me tell you something. I'm 6'5", so 7 feet is right about here on me. That means from my elbow up, I can have chopped off, and that's okay. The employer's not liable. Is that what that means? Anybody want to answer that one? No, the answer is not correct, okay? Minimum height, they have to guard to 7 feet, all right? But if you have an employee that's my height, that's working around a machine that involves them reaching up into something, the general duty clause is still going to nail you for not providing guarding because you knew that was a hazard. You knew the person was tall. You knew that person had to reach up to up above the 7-foot level to do part of their job, and there's an accident. All right? If you knew all these things, you have to provide guarding beyond basic compliance. That means you have to guard higher than 7 feet. But 7 feet is what OSHA is going to go after you. If your guards go up to at least 7 feet high from the floor up, you're good to go, unless there's an accident, in which case they're going to point the fingers at you. All right. Train your employees to never attempt to defeat or go around a guard. Never try to stop a guard from doing what it's supposed to do. You've all heard the stories, you know, the first thing a farmer does when he buys a new piece of equipment, take off all the guards. Because the guards are just things that get in the way. I can't do maintenance work. I can't do repair work on that piece of equipment. Well, the guards are in place. So I take them off. Well, that's great for the farmer, bad for them when they get a little too close to the moving parts and they get sucked into the power takeoff shaft and they start doing somersaults around this thing, breaking every bone in their body. Right? So train your employees. Never, ever defeat a guard. Do not remove guards. Don't lift them out of place. Guards are there. They're designed to keep you, the employees, safe. So that's one of the points you need to hammer home in your safety training. All right, number 8 on my hit list is ladders. Now, my area of expertise is general industry. Okay, general industry is 29 CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, Section 1910. That's general industry, which I think for most of you, except for the gentleman back here in insurance, everybody else falls under general industry. Was that a safe bet? Does anybody do anything with construction safety? I am aware of construction safety. Construction safety is 1926, right there. 1926 standards is construction safety. There's 4 different types of OSHA. There's general industry, which is 1910. Construction is 1926. Agriculture is 1928. And maritime is 1915. All right, so those 4 form your 4 basis of OSHA in the United States. All right. Construction safety is not my area of expertise. However, I do know it, so I will impart what knowledge I do know based on my knowledge of it. Last year, there was 2,448 violations relating to ladder safety in the U.S. Compliance 101, what can you do? The biggies, don't paint the ladder. Right? OSHA clearly states, if you got a ladder, if you got grease, paint, coating materials, anything else on that ladder, you need to wipe it off right away. All that material's on the rung of a ladder. If you step on the ladder, it's going to cause the ladder to be more slippery. You're going to slip and fall off the ladder. Again, big no-no. Do not paint a ladder ever. Painting was also going to hide if you have cracks or defects in the ladder. You could paint over it. You could hide the fact that there's a big crack in that wooden carpenter's ladder. Or if you could take a bunch of stickers or decals and stick it all over that thing. You can't see the hazard, right? Again, that's a no-no. Do not do that. Now, well, I was going to get to that. See, you got my segue there. Ladders always come with stickers on them. The stickers that come with it are to define what kind of OSHA grade it is. So it's grade 1, 2, 3, or 3A. That's Roman numeral 3A. That tells you how big of a person can get on that ladder. So a 3A, somebody like me that weighs around 350 pounds, yeah, with all my tools and everything else on me, I can get on a 3A ladder. Versus a class 1 ladder, no. That's the ladder's designed for smaller people, like 200 pounds or less. Right? Stickers like that come from the manufacturer, those are okay. You're not going to be dinged for that whatsoever. I'm talking about if you put your own stickers all over ladders. You know, a little sticker here and there, maybe OSHA won't say anything. But if you get that thing is covered with a lot of stickers or a lot of paint, a lot of grease, a lot of oil, they will say something about that. All right, next one. If you drop a ladder, take it out of service. This is basically true for aluminum ladders. So aluminum extension ladders or carpenter ladders, if you drop it, OSHA is concerned that you may damage the side rails or you may damage one of the rungs. You just need to take it out of service, have your maintenance person look at the ladder and say, hey, is everything okay? Are we copacetic or is there a problem? If there's a problem, fix it. If it's broken beyond repair, dispose of the ladder. Quickie, everybody know the proper way to dispose of a ladder? The safe way? You might want to guess. Chop it up. Chop it up is correct. Do I take the ladder going this way, just chop it in half and throw it in the dumpster? Is that good? What happens if you take a ladder that you know, in your heart of hearts, you know there's something wrong with this ladder? It has a big crack. Fiberglass ladder, big crack in the side rail. Not safe. I throw it in the dumpster. What is every single one of your employees going to do when they see that ladder? Looks brand new, just laying on the top of the dumpster. What are they going to do? They're going to garbage pick. They're going to go dumpster diving. They're going to say, mine, and they're going to take that home with them. They take it home, and they're crawling up on the ladder, and they fall down, and the ladder breaks. Well, it's not a work-related accident, but it is, by God, there is something known as an attorney. Attorneys will be all over that. And believe me, your company will be held liable. You better have a really good attorney to prove otherwise. Right? If you have a ladder, and you want to dispose of it, a lengthwise ladder like this, you take your chop saw, and you chop through every single one of those rungs. So now you have 2 side rails with a bunch of these little spikes sticking out of the side. That's what you throw in the dumpster. If you just cut the thing in half sideways like this, you get 2 short damaged ladders, right? So don't do it that way. All right, always use the appropriate ladder appropriately. What I mean by this, right? If you want to get up to paint a ceiling, the ideal ladder is not an extension ladder. I mean, you don't slide a ladder up and try duct taping up to the ceiling and just crawling up to the ceiling to paint that, right? I've seen pictures of people doing that very thing. What you want to use is a carpenter's ladder, type that clamshells open, has a little hinges that hinges open like this, and maybe the little shelf that pops down off the side, like things our fathers and grandfathers used years and years ago, right? That's designed for going up to the ceiling. It's designed to stand in the middle of the floor and go up to the ceiling, or stand alongside a wall and go up and paint on the wall. That same ladder is designed to be clamshelled open. It is not designed to be shut and then leaned against a wall like that. Right? That's, again, a no-no. OSHA sees that. That's a violation. Never, ever use an aluminum ladder or use anything around electrical work. Aluminum, like water, like copper wire and everything else, conducts electricity. Aluminum ladder, if you're standing on an aluminum ladder, with or without the little rubber suction cups on the bottom, will be a grounded source. Right? You go crawling up on that, you touch the bare wire, you're grounded, your worker is going to get a shock, or worse, they're going to be electrocuted and dead. Okay? Never use an aluminum ladder when they're doing any work, repair work, maintenance work, or anything around electricity. Aluminum ladders are great. I mean, they're very durable, they're going to last forever, but you need to be careful. When you're working around electricity, you want to use a fiberglass side rail ladder or use a wooden ladder. All right, number 7 on my list, electrical wiring methods, 1910.305, I'm sorry. In this one, there was 2,490 violations in the US last year. All right, Compliance 101, what can you do? All right. No wiring system of any type may be installed in ductwork used for transferring combustible dust, combustible liquids, or flammable liquids, and so on. If you have wiring, keep it out of the ductwork, put it next to the ductwork. Right? At home, a lot of times people like to they install a new cable TV or a new cable system for their computer, and the installation person says, oh, I got ductwork, this hot air ductwork or the return air ductwork. I'll just run it up through there and then just pop it out through a vent in the room where you are. That way I don't have to drill holes in your walls. Well, it works, but it's also dangerous. Now, if you do it at home, no harm, no foul, because OSHA has no say-so over that. It's not a good idea, but again, it's not illegal in your home, to the best of my knowledge. You do this in the workplace, on the other hand, yeah, OSHA is going to have something to say about that. Don't run wiring systems through ductwork. Run it next to, on the outside of ductwork. Extension cords. Extension cords are temporary use only. Extension cords are designed to be for no more than 30 days use. Right? If OSHA comes to your facility and they see something like this, with this extension cord here, it's got the zip ties on it, holding it to whatever that upright is, I think this was a fan, they're going to call that a violation, because that is obviously there on a permanent basis. If they go to your facility and they see an extension cord laying there and there's just dust over the floor and dust over the extension cord, and it's obvious it's been there as long as the dust has, they're going to nail you for that. Right? Extension cords are temporary use only. 30 days or less is okay. You are granted a little bit of exemption if you want to hook up a holiday display. Say if you got Christmas, you got putting up the Christmas lights around Thanksgiving time, you run through Christmas and New Year's, that's okay. You can go beyond 30 days for that, and OSHA's cool with that. But know when to say when, right? For the gentleman in the room, when your wife says, honey, get those Christmas lights off the house now. Same thing goes at work, right? January 1st, 2nd, 3rd, take the lights down, right? If you're going to leave them up there long term, you do run the risk of an OSHA violation. All right, use grounded receptacles. Quickie, never ever use grounding adapters, all right? The old-fashioned homes, older buildings, they didn't have the 3-prong outlets on the outlets. They had 2 prongs. Does anybody remember these? Those of you who've been around the earth as long as I have probably seen that a few times. House we used to live in when I was a kid had that. They only had 2 slots. You plug something in, right? That's the way they came. That's the way all houses were. 1971, 2, 3, something like that. The NEC came out with one of their new policies, and they created the grounded plugs. Okay, so grounded plugs, the outlet is the 3-prong outlet, right? As long as you plug it in that, it provides a grounded source, provides a safer use for you, the user, right? So what happens if you have your nice brand new laptop or nice brand new blender or some other piece of machinery in the office, and it has a 3-prong plug? And you go up to this outlet, it's only got 2 prongs. What do I do? How do I beat that? Any idea? New receptacle? Well, that's the best answer. What's the answer everybody else is going to do probably first?
Cut that prong off.
Cut the prong off is one. You take the prong, that prong inside the 3-prong plug, if you ever want to worry about this, you clamp the thing in a vise, grab a pair of vice grips or pliers in the other hand, and kind of wiggle it back and forth. It'll just rip out like a loose tooth. That thing only goes in about 1/8 of an inch. It's just lead solder from there onto the copper wire inside the extension cord. It'll pop out without too much effort. That's one way. Another way is put on one of those little adapters. You can buy it at CVS or Walgreens, a little gray color thing. You plug the adapter over the top of the 3-prong plug, and suddenly there's only 2 prongs sticking out here. The 2 prongs go in the 2-prong outlet, and away you go. Okay, that's something else you can do. If you decide to use one of these adapters, has anybody ever seen that little wire sticking out with a little green-shaped, U-shaped piece of metal? Anybody else know what that's for? Look at that. When I first heard about this, I'd never heard that in my life. I just thought, oh, just a piece of extra junk, and like, who cares what that's for? But he's correct. What you do is that little piece of wire, you take your switch plate cover, you loosen up the center screw, you take that U-shaped piece of metal and you stick it in there and you screw on top of that, and that becomes your grounded circuit. Right? So the junction box itself, the conduit line, and everything inside the wall becomes the grounded circuit. So that provides safety for you. So you can use a grounding adapter, or you could yank the grounding plug. Those are the two things you can do. Now that I've said that, if you do that at home, okay, fine. It's your home, your Lord, God, and Master or Mistress at the home. You can do anything you want. OSHA has no say-so over that. If, however, you do it in the workplace, shame on you, and say hello to a violation. You will get an OSHA citation for that if you do either one of those activities. Never, ever yank a grounding plug, ever, in the workplace. Never use a grounding adapter. Okay, OSHA takes a dim view on that, because that what we described, putting that, loosening up the center screw. OSHA's aware most people don't do that, or if they just don't do it, some of them just don't know to do that, right? So they know it's not going to provide any safety whatsoever. OSHA's answer is, if you got that situation, you call an electrician in and you rewire your circuit. The gentleman in the back said, you put in a new plug, right? All right, number 6 on my hit list here. This is powered industrial trucks, 1910.178. 2,662 violations in 2014. Basic compliance for powered industrial trucks. The biggie, ensure only qualified people are allowed to drive forklifts or powered industrial trucks at your facility. Somebody that's been trained. They've been certified and evaluated, and somebody says, yes, this person knows what they're doing. All right? Don't use gas or diesel industrial trucks indoors. Gas, diesel vehicles tend to produce a lot of carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide gases. Inside the building, it's going to produce a lot of headaches for all your employees at very least. At very worst, you're going to have people going to the hospital, maybe suffocating carbon monoxide poisoning. All right? The PELs for carbon monoxide is only 50 parts per million. Inside a reasonably small room, you start operating a forklift in there, a gas or diesel forklift, that exhaust level is going to kick up the parts per million concentration for CO very, very quickly. Right? So those, it's not illegal or improper to use them indoors, but it is extremely unsafe. Right? That's what electrical forklifts are for. Electrical forklifts are perfect for indoors. You can use propane. Propane is used if it's some indoor, some outdoor, only if there's like doors open or windows open or something like that, or the dock doors are open. If you're in a facility this time of year, everything's shut up tight as a drum, don't use gas, diesel, or propane indoors. It's just not safe. Eye wash has to be in close proximity to the battery charger. Right? OSHA mandates anytime you do any type of corrosive materials around anything with a strong acid, strong base, has to have at least an emergency eye wash and or safety shower combination in close proximity to that activity. OSHA defines in a letter of interpretation what is close proximity. Close proximity is defined as no more than 50 feet away or no more than a 10-second walk on the same level, meaning I have to be able to get here on the same floor. I'm not expected to go up a flight of stairs or go up a ladder or down a ladder or through the manhole or through that door, around the corner, through this other door to get to it. It has to be very close proximity to where the activity is. And battery charging, since you have sulfuric acid inside the forklift batteries, is considered a corrosive activity. So emergency eye wash station within close proximity to there. Never exceed the rated capacity of the forklift. Anybody ever been around where a forklift tries to pick up something that's too heavy? Yeah, what happened?
Tips.
It tips forward, it nosedives, the back end hops up. Right? It's dangerous. The forklift could tip over. You're going to shift the center of gravity outside that mythical stability triangle. The forklift may flip, the driver may dump. If the driver is somehow neglected to wear their seatbelt, like we all know they're supposed to, and they fall out of the forklift, they could be crushed underneath the unit. Right? So it's very, very, very important. Never ever exceeded the rated capacity. The capacity is almost always listed on a little sticker somewhere on one of the A-frame members on the side of the forklift. Or your maintenance person would have that information. If you have something routinely exceeding that rated capacity, it's time to lease or buy a brand new one that has a bigger rated capacity.
Net capacity doesn't, it's only against the carriage.
Yeah.
It's out to the tips.
Yeah, right.
Your capacity decreases.
What he's talking about here, the laws of physics, the longer your lever arm, the longer you're picking up. So if you're picking up something just on the tips of the forks, it's going to decrease the amount you can lift. the same amount, so a 500-pound weight on the back of the forklift up by the mast, forklift goes up no problem. Try to pick up a 500-pound weight out way on the, just touching the very tips of it, the forklift's going to flip. It's not going to be able to pick up as much. Yes?
How often does OSHA require you to do forklift training with your employees? Or don't?
Every 3 years. Yeah, everybody has to be trained as a minimum. You know, everybody that operates the forklifts once every 3 years. And then there's exceptions. You know, if they're in an accident, you train them. You provide refresher training. If you buy or lease a new unit that no one's ever used before, you give them the refresher training such that what they need to operate that unit. Meaning, you don't have to do your classroom stuff over again, but you certainly have to do the live training where you say, okay, here's the brake, here's how you accelerate, the gear shift's a little different, this one has a grabber, this one has an extender, and so on. So just tell them, teach them what they don't already know.
David, I don't know if you're going to get to this, but with the training of employees, any companies that are a host employer, you have temporary staff personnel working for you operating forklift trucks, the host employer needs to be responsible to do the training.
Yeah.
You should ask that the temp staff company has them already trained, but you're going to need to verify and do the internal training as though they're your own employees.
That's correct.
That's overlooked a lot, and sometimes that can create some issue.
Yep. Whoever's supervising the employee is the one OSHA is going to point the finger at. So if, like I said, if you have a bunch of temps, we use Aerotech in my company as a temporary staffing, temp to hire, right? We're supervising them, therefore we are responsible to provide any training they may need. You know, if Aerotech wants to be on the ball and say, hey, we gave them the 10-hour training, or we gave them their ASWAPer training, well, that's good, that's well and fine, but if we expect them to operate forklifts or to use a respirator in our work site or anything else that requires training, it's our responsibility to make sure it's actually done. Last thing there, complete the shift inspection. Every forklift, before you operate it, needs to have an inspection done on that unit at least once per shift. You can do it more often than once a shift. You can make your company say, every time you get on a forklift, fill out the inspection report and sign it, whatever you want to do, but at least as a minimum, once per shift, operating shift. It does not have to be the driver, it can be the maintenance person. We got one of our clients, that's exactly what they do. They're like, the drivers don't know, the drivers know how to operate it. They don't know if something is wrong or what's wrong with it. So we have the maintenance person, they look at each unit once per shift, once in day, once at night shift, and they're the ones that evaluate, is everything operating properly? The hydraulic system okay? Is the backup horn operating fine? Are the lights bright enough? Is there a short? See any bare wires sticking out somewhere that could cause a hazard? All right, number 5 on my hit list from last year, lockout tagout, 1910.147 with 2,704 violations. Basic compliance on lockout tagout. Always, always, always use lockout tagout if you are doing any kind of maintenance or repair work on that piece of equipment and there is some form of hazardous energy that can't be easily controlled. Meaning, if I want to do repair work on my laptop, if I want to walk over my laptop, I can just unplug it from the wall. Boom. Now there is no hazardous energy connected with that whatsoever. Other than it's slightly warm, I'll let it cool down. I don't need to do lockout tagout on that. But if that same laptop, instead of plugged in the wall, is now hardwired, meaning there's no plug, it's got a wire running directly into a junction box, and there's no way for me to pull that wire out of that junction box, now I have to do lockout tagout on that piece of equipment. Never cut off a lock. And I know there's exceptions to that statement right there. What I mean by this is, you want to make sure you train your employees. If you see a lock, you go there, if you see a lock and a tag hanging there, obviously it's lockout tagout, it says lockout tagout or LOTO on there, right on there, tell them, do not to go out there and cut off that lock. It's not your place to remove the lock, right? The lock is there to prevent you from operating that piece of equipment. If somebody cuts a lock and uses a piece of equipment and there's an accident, yeah, OSHA is going to give the violation to the employer, but the employer is probably going to turn and point the finger at that employee and say, as soon as you get out of the hospital and as soon as they're done giving you stitches, you're out of here, you're fired. Okay? You do not cut off locks. Now, not every company will do that. Some will, some won't. I've been around a lot of companies that do. They take a very dim view of anybody intentionally defeating guards or intentionally defeating lockout tagout or any safety measures. The one exception is, if you got a person that hung the lock, they're out sick, they went on vacation, and you have to do some maintenance or repair work, all right? Facility manager like for you alone or your designee, usually one person is allowed to do this at a facility, you can take a pair of bolt cutters, you can cut it off. But you have to make sure you've made every effort to notify the person that hung the lock. You have to make sure you're documenting why you're doing that, right? And if OSHA, if there's ever an incident, OSHA will point the fingers at that right there, and you better be able to defend why it is you did that, and that you did everything properly. To notify everybody, to let everybody know we're cutting the lock because, and fill in the blank. So it's not to be done lightly. Very, very rarely will somebody do that. Document lockout tagout. If there's no documentation, what does that mean? Anybody? It doesn't exist. All right, you're right. If you didn't document it, nothing happened. This isn't like the good old days when Abe Lincoln was running for president and he would say, "Hi, my name's Abe Lincoln and I'm running for president of the United States. I will be the best president you've ever had. You can trust me. I'm giving you my word." That may have been good for Abe, but for OSHA, sorry, they're not going to take a gentleman's agreement. They want something in writing, documented proof that you did lockout tagout or you did anything else relating to safety. Relating to that, here's one way you can document it. If you do your annual procedure review. Does everybody here in your company have to do lockout tagout? Not you personally, but does your company? Does anybody not? Okay, everybody does. So everybody, if presuming you're an EHS manager or a safety manager, you should already be aware lockout tagout requirements require that anytime you have a procedure in place, you have to review that procedure at least once a year. You have to provide some kind of documentation on some form. It can be an internally created form that just documents this is a lockout tagout procedure review. And we've looked at it. We've talked to Joe Schmo, and Joe Schmo is my maintenance manager. And I've talked to Bob Smith, who's the assistant. And both of them, we've looked at each one of the procedures in turn and reviewed them, and everybody agrees the procedure is adequate and does protect their employees. Usually you sign and date that, and you maintain that record essentially forever, right? OSHA does have record-keeping requirements, and I don't remember the years on that offhand. Yes?
One more thing with that, we had OSHA a few years ago, another complaint, and the inspector was out of the Aurora office, and she was the trainer
right.
for lockout tagout.
Okay.
It was a hot button. So the first thing she said to me, she said, "I want to see your lockout tagout program." She went through it all, she said, "Looks very good." Next thing she said is, "How do you discipline? Do you discipline?"
Oh, yeah.
I do. I want to see the discipline.
Yeah.
What she said to me was, she said, "I've been to all the companies, boards, you know, the GMs, they have elaborate programs, they're great. When I ask them that question,
Right.
they don't do it. And that's what gets you in trouble. That's
You're
where
right.
the violation comes in because you didn't do anything about it. We love Joe when he's a great person,
Right,
but
yep,
we didn't discipline him. And if the discipline's consistent, you have no problem."
Right. And what on that, well, we do a lot of bids. As a consultant, we bid on a lot of projects, and that's one of the things they're now hitting on lately. You have to have a disciplinary program in place. What if there's a violation of your safety? What if somebody defeats lockout tagout? What if somebody takes a guard off? You know, what if somebody doesn't wear the appropriate PPE, even though they've been trained to do so? What do? You have to have something in writing, usually in your HR manual or something that would say, in the event of a safety variation or safety citation or something that you personally as an employee did wrong, here's what we'll do. We'll write you up first, we'll lecture you, we'll send you away from work without pay for a day, you know, whatever it is. You have to list things out and exactly what it is you're going to do. Now, you don't have to give exact examples because there's a myriad of things people could possibly do wrong, right? But you have to have some kind of disciplinary program in place, and it has to say that somewhere in your safety plans, you know, if there's a violation of any one of these things, the company's internal disciplinary program or, you know, or wording to that effect takes effect, all right? So good question and statement there. Number 4 on my list, respiratory protection. There, talk about it. Wearing respirators. 3,223 violations last year. Basic compliance and respirators, right? Anytime you have any hazard in the workplace, any known hazard, OSHA mandates you have to try some form of engineering control first. If engineering controls fail or are not feasible or just simply too expensive, you have to give a whirl at administrative or work practice controls. If these don't work, or again are too expensive or just not something that's going to be feasible for us, then you're allowed to go to PPE. You're not supposed to stampede directly to PPE, meaning the work environment's really dusty, it's really hot, it's really humid in the work area. What do? OSHA wants you to be able to document and say, hey, we looked at the situation and we said, oh, I know what we'll do. We'll install an air conditioning system that cools the whole plant. All right. So the engineer comes, the HVAC person comes and looks at it and says, you need a unit that's, and I don't know HVAC, you know, X big, you know, this or whatever, and it's going to cost you X millions of dollars to install, and that will adequately cool your work environment. And you're like, hold the phone. My company's only worth $4 million, you know. I'm not going to install a $4 million air conditioning system. You know, I'll bankrupt me. No way. What else can I do? Like, well, we can install a bunch of fans, you know, the big ass fans, you know, that's what the company's name is, Big Ass Fan. And they have those great big ceiling fans, and they rotate in the ceiling. It'll kind of move the air around. It's not going to cool the air, but at least move it around, right? That's something I could possibly do. What else? Like, well, we could rotate your work assignments, you know, do administrative controls. Maybe we'll say, instead of working throughout the heat of the day, tell you what, folks, it's hot this time of the year. We're going to say it's July instead of January now. Everybody, instead of coming in at 6, we're going to come in at 3 in the morning. And shift is going to be from 3 in the morning till 11:30, right? So you're all done. So instead of going home at 2:30 and 3, meaning you're working through the absolute hottest part of the day between noon and 3 o'clock, instead you'll be getting done right before that, right? So there's things like that you can do. The last form of protection then is providing some form of PPE, some form of personal protective equipment, right? So you always want to try to exhaust your engineering or administrative controls before you go to PPE controls. Now, in this particular one, this is respiratory protection, wearing respirators, dust masks, you know, air purifying respirators, self-contained breathing apparatus, and so on. Anytime you use any form of respirator in the workplace, if it's mandatory, you have to wear a respirator in the workplace, you have to do these things, right? These things are required, as you can see in the fine print here. Every employee is required to complete the questionnaire. Questionnaire is a 3 to 4 page document. It's in one of the appendices to OSHA's 1910.134. They have to fill out the questionnaire. That has to be done on work time. Then they have to take that with them when they go for their medical exam. Medical exam number 2 right there. Medical exam is done by a medical professional, not necessarily a doctor. I've been getting a respirator in years past for a number of years, and I think I saw a doctor once. It was usually a nurse or some kind of technician, somebody that was qualified to listen to your heart, maybe look at a chest x-ray and go, you look healthy to me, sir. Away you go, right? It doesn't have to be anything too fancy. As long as everybody agrees that this is what we're going to do, you go through like an occupational clinic or something like that specializes in this, and they'll take care of it for you. Third thing on that list is PFT. Everybody know what PFT means? Pulmonary function testing. PFT, pulmonary function test, also known as spirometry testing. This is blowing in a tube. Now, I'm not talking about blowing in a tube on Friday night by the state police. This version of blowing in a tube is to measure your lung capacity, to see do you have adequate lung capacity. Anytime you wear any form of respiratory protection, it's going to restrict the amount of air you breathe. It's more difficult to breathe the air in. You know, you're wearing some mask, a half face, a full face, or whatever on your face. It's a little more difficult to breathe. So they want to make sure you have adequate lung capacity and don't have any kind of restrictions. Meaning, if you have asthma, you're going to flunk the PFT. I've got asthma. I can't take the respirator. I haven't been able to wear a respirator in the last 3 years now. I've got adult onset. Lucky me. But anyway, if you have anybody that has asthma, they're going to flunk the test. They may have some other respiratory issue. They may flunk the pulmonary function test. If they do, they can't wear a respirator. You have to find something else for that person to do, or you have to go back up to number 1 and look for better engineering or administrative controls such that you don't have to rely on a respirator. Right? So that's your choice. Either reassign the person or do better controls. You have to do fit testing. Fit testing is either qualitative or quantitative. Qualitative is the most common one, where the person puts the respirator on and they squirt the smoke around their face, the irritant smoke, or the isoamyl acetate, which is banana oil, or the saccharin solution. Do you smell or taste the solution while they do various motions like move the respirator up, down, left, right, and you talk and that kind of stuff to see if you can break the seal. If you can pass that, you pass the test. All right? And last, you get training. You train your employees. Just like any other safety function, nothing is complete unless you've done the training and you've documented that you've done the training. If you use them, you must have a written program. This is one area OSHA flat out mandates. Thou shalt have a written program to go with your respiratory protection program in your workplace if you require some form of respirators. That includes dust masks, air purifying respirators, positive pressure, and any of the like. If you require their use in the worksite, you have to have a program, a written program in place to say, how am I going to comply with the 1910.134 standards? What is my end of service life indicator going to be? How long does a person wear a respirator? Where do you wear it? Where do you not wear it? You know, things like that. And make sure you document your training. All right, number 3 on my hit list, scaffolding. Again, this is construction safety. Yes, sir.
David, plug for you guys. One thing on this, on the respiratory protection, is a lot of times, and always, if you do pick personal protective equipment,
Yeah.
respirators required. OSHA's going to expect you have some backup, that you've done some industrial hygiene air sampling to validate if you do or do not. What levels do you have? So, I mean, that would be one thing. Most companies would probably hire a starting plat for something along those lines.
Yeah.
But that's just the one area I've seen people get cited where they might have a nice respirator program, but they don't really know how much dust they're exposed to, or fume or vapor or whatever it might be. So
Good
that's
point.
another
Yep.
step, and I think that's something in your wheelhouse, right?
That is. We can do that. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Anybody that's industrial hygienist can do that. That's really their bailiwick, but yes, we can do that. All right, number 3, scaffolding, 4,029 violations. Basic compliance is a biggie. A ladder is not a scaffold. Everybody tell me, how are ladders supposed to be used? In what manner? What do you do with a ladder? Do you use a ladder to scratch an itch on your back? What does a ladder do? Does anybody want to help me out? I'm from Mars. I've never heard of the word ladder. Come on, somebody.
Gain access to height.
Gain access to heights. Thank you. Ladders are used to go up on something, or you put a ladder in a hole and you climb down in the hole on the ladder. Ladders are used in the vertical. Ladders in the horizontal are a no-no. OSHA sees that, that's a violation, right? Ladders, especially on a wood ladder, the wood grain is designed so that when you're walking on a ladder this way, pushing down in a vertical position this way, it provides its greatest strength, its greatest shear strength. You put it on a ladder like this, it's going against the grain this way, rungs are more likely to rip out the side rails and the thing's going to break, and you're going to go to the bottom, wherever the bottom happens to be. All right? So ladders do not equal scaffolds. I know they work really well like a scaffold, and I know personally I've done it the same thing at home, but again, home is not OSHA. All right, cross braces shall not be used as the means of access. I don't have a cool picture here, but the cross braces are those pieces of angle iron that pipes to go up the side of the scaffold that give the structure or the form to the scaffold itself, right? If you want to gain access to the top of a scaffold, use a ladder, right? That's permanently mounted to the side, or you use a man lift or a scissor lift or some form of elevator to get to the top of the scaffolding, right? Do not let your workers climb up the side of the scaffold like monkeys. People do it all the time, and I see it all the time. If OSHA sees it, though, again, that's a violation. Scaffolds should be erected, moved, dismantled, or altered only under the supervision of a competent person. By competent person, I don't mean somebody who's really smart or really good or kind of knows their stuff. A competent person is actually a legal description of somebody who's been through training to do just this, to work on scaffolds. Right? There is actually classes you can take specifically to become a competent person to work on scaffolding. Ordinarily, this is somebody who have your worksite called a rigger. Riggers change scaffolding, they move scaffolding, they dismantle it, they fix it, and so on. Nobody else is supposed to do that. Okay? You need somebody that's qualified, a competent person that knows what they're doing. Employees will not work on scaffolds if they're covered by snow, ice, or any other slippery material. If they've got a lot of oil, they got sprayed with oil or something like that. You need to clean that off. Now, it is okay if you have somebody on the scaffold, done so in a safe manner, while they're scraping the ice and snow off, you can do that. They can go up there for that. But they can't go up on that scaffold and work unless that stuff has been already cleared off. All right? Last, high wind means don't use. Caveat to that story. Does anybody remember, it was like 3-4 years ago, there was a student at Notre Dame. Yeah. He went up on a scissors lift, which is an aerial lift. It's kind of like a scaffold. He went up there, he was videotaping the football team during practice. Problem is, high winds came up, the wind shear caught the side of that thing, it tipped over, he fell about 40 feet and was killed. All right? If there's high winds, avoid scissors lifts, aerial lifts, scaffolding, anything like that. That is not designed to be used outdoors in high winds. All right? Number 2 on my hit list, almost done. Hazard communication, HAZCOM. 5,161 violations last year. Basic compliance for hazard communication starts off with You must have an MSDS or the new GHS compliant safety data sheet in place for all hazardous chemicals, hazardous materials found in your workplace. There's a few exceptions. Things like hazardous waste does not require an MSDS. Medication does not require an MSDS. So if you have aspirin available in your first aid kit, that does not require it. That's exempt from HazCom. But everything else, virtually all other materials, do have to have an MSDS or a safety data sheet present in your workplace. And that's for raw materials or for finished goods. If you're producing a chemical manufacturer or paint manufacturer, you have to have it for those materials as well. Train all employees. Like anything else, training is of the utmost importance. When it comes to safety, you've got to train. If the standard applies to you, you have to train and you have to document that you did the training. HazCom is the biggie when it comes to training. The three big legs, or the support structures, if you will, of hazard communication are MSDSs, or safety data sheets, container labeling, and last, employee training. HazCom is known as the employee right to know standard. Employees have the right to know about hazards found in the workplace. And the only way they're going to find out what those hazards are is through training. Make sure all containers are labeled. I mentioned that already. Last thing on here, GHS compliance. GHS, a globally harmonized system of the classification and labeling of chemicals. GHS came about through the United Nations, came into effect in 2012, I want to say, in the United States. It started to take effect last year. December 1st of last year, every single person in this room, if you are the boss, was your duty to make sure that every single one of your employees had been trained on the new GHS requirements. And basically all that training is what is the new safety data sheets, how are they comprised, what do they look like, talk about the pictograms, go through each one of them and it's fine. This is what the flame is, this is what corrosive is, this is what environment one is, and so on. And last, talk about the new label requirements, having the new signal words on there, having the hazard statements, the precautionary statements on the labels, all right? That training had to be done by December 1st last year. The new deadline on this year, June 1st of this year, you have to begin using safety data sheets. So if you have an MSDS binder, all the MSDSs better be gone and they better be replaced by safety data sheets. Now, if you're just the end user, you have no control over whether you get this or not. So it would behoove you to maybe call your vendor, hey, I buy paint from you, I buy solvent or toluene from you, I need the new safety data sheet, do you have it yet? Pester them if they haven't given it to you already. Most companies are on the ball and they've already provided all that stuff and you should have it. You take those safety data sheets, that becomes your active list. You take all those, excuse me, old MSDSs and those go in your archive file. Your archive file is not the garbage can. The archive file is something that you keep those documents for up to 30 years. So in the future, if one of your employees says, hey, you know what, I was working at this compound called benzene, and lo and behold, I developed some horrible cancer as a result of my working with benzene. And later on, people are like, well, yeah, that makes sense because benzene is a potential carcinogen. Sure, of course you would have developed cancer. It's unfortunate, but yeah. The way to prove did your company actually use benzene is they would look through your MSDS binder, your archive file 20, 30 years ago. Did you work with benzene? If the answer is no, the lawyer tells the client, tough luck, Charlie, it didn't happen at this place. Maybe somewhere else is where you got it, all right? But that's the way you document. You protect yourself as the employer, and also you protect your employees to let them know what hazardous chemicals you're working with. All right, the number one and final one here. Can anybody guess? Fall protection. This is one of biggest OSHA's hit list lately. Fall protection, again, construction safety. Last year, almost 6,200 violations. All right, compliance 101 for fall protection. Personal fall arrest systems are required anytime you're going beyond what's considered a passive system. The passive system are your guardrails. So if you're on a scissors lift, you got guardrails on all four sides. As long as your body stays inside the confines of there and you're not reaching out or extending out, you're fine. That's all you need. You're standing in the guardrail. If you're up on the roof of a building and there's guardrails on all four sides on a certain area, like a penthouse area, where a maintenance person can go and work on the HVAC system, that's fine. You don't need any fall protection whatsoever. But if, however, you go beyond that passive area of passive restraint and you jump over the fence, if you go beyond the guardrail, or if you're on a scissor lift and you're having to reach out over the thing to change light bulbs up on the ceiling or something like that, that's where you also have to have some active form of fall protection. And the active form of fall protection involved is known as the climbing harness, the safety harness. You know, the straps go over your shoulder, around your legs, straps goes around your waist, hooked up to a safety lanyard that's hooked up to a suitable anchor point. That's if you're going beyond the passive system of the guardrails. Stay inside the guardrails, whoops, no. Your magic numbers, all right. In a general industry setting, which for most of you, factories, this is what's going to apply. OSHA says if you're working at a height of 4 feet or more above the ground, then, and you're beyond the passive restraint system, then you have to have some form of active protection, meaning safety harness with lanyard. Construction safety, they give them a little bit more leeway. They let them go as high as 6 feet before you have to have an active system. And the difference between the two, industrial setting, if you're working at a factory, the general industry, the 1910 standards, the 4-foot height limit will apply. If you go to a construction site, or if they're doing maintenance or repair work where they're doing active construction on your facility, the construction standards are going to apply. And then the last biggie on there is if you're working on a scaffold. Scaffold, again, if your height of 10 feet is your magic number, if the scaffolding is short, it's only 6, 8, 9 feet high, you don't have to have fall protection on as long as you maintain your body inside the climbing area, right? All right, so in summary, almost done. Key points to remember. The old saying, you know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, definitely applies, right? Learn from our past mistakes. That's why it's good to learn from this type of training. You hear what happened in the past. What can we do to prevent this from happening in the future? You know, to prevent an accident just goes through simple training. Review your safety program. You know, make sure your written program's in place. Make sure you're documenting everything. That's easy. That's pretty quick. It takes a few hours, maybe a few days, and you're done. If you have an accident or incident, and you have a violation as a result of it, well, guess what? You get to do all those same things I just described, plus you now get to write a nice pretty letter to OSHA explaining why it is you did all those things and explaining what you're going to do to abate that and mean that you're going to prevent it from happening in the future. And then you get to whip out the checkbook and somebody gets to write a nice pretty check with a lot of zeros at the end of it and hand it over to OSHA. Never a fun thing. Documentation. Remember, we all said it here, we all agree. If you didn't document it, what does that mean? Didn't happen, right? You gotta document it. Have to. You gotta have something. For training, have sign-in sheets for everything. Talk about the topic. Have a copy of the training module itself. Any handouts you gave people, things like this. You save a copy of all those things, a copy of the sign-in sheet. If an outside vendor came in and did their training, somebody like me, I would give you a cover letter that says, on the following day, I trained the following people listed by name on the following topics. You know, this cover pursuant to OSHA 29 CFR 1910.147A3 or whatever. That's what it'll give you. That's what you want to document. Your lockout, tagout, save your annual procedure review. Save that. You need to be able to document that you're doing these things. If you can't document it, remember, it didn't happen. The last one, bullet points, as I said, important. Training, training, training. You gotta train your employees. Yeah, that's the best way, the only way to tell people how it is they're supposed to do their job. If you send a person out and don't give them any training whatsoever and there's an accident, it's not really their fault. It's whoever sent them out there, it's their fault. Okay, so you got to train your employees. You have to document that you did the training. And that's all I have for you. Are there any questions? I know it's getting warm in here. Yes, sir.
Did OSHA, did they publish anything yet about their special emphasis or local emphasis programs? Do you know if that's on the website yet, or?
Usually I just Google that and just say local emphasis program, you know, region 5, and see what pops up, or the national emphasis program and see what pops up. I haven't checked. I've been out of it. I've been doing other stuff here for the last 2 weeks. I didn't even look lately. The last one they were doing was traumatic amputations. I've done ones in the past for crystalline silica. Fall protection, as of the end of the year, was one of their big hits. I think that was the national emphasis program. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question on service techs having vans and taking them home.
Mm-hmm.
If they get into an accident on the way home from work, is that considered?
Are they being paid to go home?
They're not being, well, their salary.
Okay, yeah, I'm salary too. So what I would say is it's not the work environment anymore. They're in the work vehicle, but they're going home. So to me, if I was going to do a recordable incident, I would say that's not recordable because they're going home. You know, if their intent was to go to Menards and buy something for work and then go home, and they got an accident between home and Menards, then it would be recordable.
And if they drive the company van, say at 8 o'clock at night just to run out to the store, and they accident, is it feasible to have some documentation or some written agreement for the employee to sign to say they will not use the van outside of company time, or are you still not liable because they did what they knew they weren't
Well,
supposed to do?
liability is different than recordability. Recordability is whether or not it's OSHA recordable. That's what I do. Liability is a legal issue. That's when an attorney is going to step in and say, you need to pay my bill for that answer.
At that point
But,
is
right.
an insurance.
Yeah, if you're driving a company vehicle, your employee is always liable. Meaning, if they're driving and they had a few beers and they got in an accident and they killed somebody, yeah, they're liable personally for having the accident. But it's your company van. Guarantee you, some smart attorney is going to say, "Ooh, the name of your company is this. Oh, guess what? We're going to sue you."
So it's
Yeah.
all based on the purpose of them driving the van.
Right.
at that
Yeah. And that's why if you can document why did they have the van, did they have the van illegally? Did they just take it without asking? Again, that's like, ooh, you can make sure you document that, and that would go against you, go in your favor. Certainly for recordability, it may not be recordable, and for liability, it would help you as well.
But if they went out at 8 o'clock at night, which is not typical company time, to
Right.
buy a part for a job the next day, that's recordable.
Probably would be, yeah. If they're doing something on behalf or that benefits the company in some way, that makes it recordable. Correct. Whether or not they're getting paid for it or not. If they're just doing it,
And if they're selling it, doesn't
yeah.
matter.
And if they're on their own personal vehicle and they do it, probably not. That you're getting in the maybes and stuff like that, and that's where you really have to start looking at the rules. So the rules do give you a lot of wiggle room. If you go in the 1904 section, it talks about recording of what is work related, what's not. They give you a lot of exceptions. There's a few more that I didn't list. I only listed 9 of them. Yes, sir.
One thing for you, just since you've had respiratory in your top
Mhm.
5,
OSHA did. I didn't. But anyway, yes, sir.
last year I got a violation for my facility for supplying dust nuisance masks to my
Oh.
employees. So respirators are not just respirators, it can be a paper mask too.
You are correct.
And what the violation they wrote me for was I didn't have records of mandatory training for voluntary PPE. I fought it and won, but that's the level they take it to. So anything over
Right.
someone's face is considered a respirator to these guys.
You're correct. An N95 dust mask, what a doctor wears. Okay, a dust mask, that is a respirator. If you require them, say, your job, Jose Smith, is to sweep the floor. Okay, Jose, it's going to be dusty while you do this. It's kind of nasty. We're going to give you a respirator. We're going to give you a dust mask to wear. Right? We want you to wear it, meaning it's in your job description. Put on a respirator when you sweep the floor. Okay, Jose puts it on, does it. OSHA comes by, sees Jose walking around with his dust mask on. They ask Jose, "Jose, come here. Why are you wearing that?" He goes, "Well, the boss told me I had to." He had to? We're like, "Okay, no problem. You're okay. It's legal to tell somebody to wear a dust mask. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that." OSHA gets the supervisor, says, "Jose says you told him he had to wear a respirator, the dust mask. Is that correct?" And he goes, "Yeah, that's right. It's dusty, it's nasty, it's dirty. We want to protect our workers." Okay, no problem with that. That's perfectly legal. Let's see his training records. Right? Have you trained him on the proper way to don and doff, meaning put on and take off that respirator? How about the fit testing? Have you done fit testing? Since that's a required respiratory protection, you have to do fit testing on that. Have you done it? No? There's 2 violations. What else can I get you for? Somebody besides Jose wear a respirator here, a dust mask? I'm going to get 2 violations for the price of 1. Right? And they keep going from there. So if the respirators are required for use by the supervisors, the company requires you to wear them, you have to provide training, you have to do pulmonary function testing, and everything else. And I know what you said, it was voluntary use.
This was not required.
Yeah, voluntary
They are
use.
available on a voluntary basis if they choose to do it.
Right, and then the exception is if it's voluntary use, dust mask. A paper dust mask, no, OSHA can't require you to do anything for those,
But
for
they
voluntary.
looked up for it.
Well, you
And
know
they
what?
Oh, I know.
got a
They're-
violation for it, and I had to fight it.
There is
I
a
had to go to
standard
the
for
Cal
that.
City office. I know, there's actually training
There's a
materials.
non-mandatory appendice D
Yeah.
that your employees have to fill out if it's a voluntary use.
Yeah.
Right,
It's minimal training, but if they say, hey, I just feel there's probably some hazards beyond
yeah.
what you're saying, or I'm just
Yeah, we even
concerned.
came up with the air test.
Fill out a piece of paper.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
10-minute
They
training.
backed down because
Yeah.
it was getting a little ridiculous, but that's the level they take.
And you're right, they do. Well, I've had a number of clients that tell people to wear a dust mask, and they didn't do fit testing, and they get written up for it, and that citation will stick. So, voluntary use, if you voluntarily allow somebody to wear a half-face respirator, you as the employer are still responsible to make sure they know how to put it on and take it off and when to change the cartridges. You're still responsible to make sure they did all those things. And since no employee is going to know those things, they're going to go after whoever has the most money in their wallet, which is you, the employer. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Is it acceptable to repair that?
Repair what?
Ladders. You said if you drop it,
If you drop it, yeah, it has to be somehow, you have to document that your repair work was adequate and safe. Again, that's a construction safety standard, and I don't know construction safety that well. I mean, I know it, I know of it, and I've read through a lot of it. And what I've seen hasn't said it's illegal as long as it's done properly with a competent person or somebody who knows what it is they're doing. Anybody else? Again,
contractor gets injured on your property,
yes.
that OSHA reportable?
Who was supervising the contractor? Most contractors, like say an electrician's coming in, rewiring a circuit board, boom, a short circuit, blows off a finger. Is that recordable for you? No, because he's his own supervisor. If he's he or she, their own supervisor, it's not recordable for you, the employer. Right? If you hire a contractor and this contractor is going to work on site for the next year every day, and they're going to report to one of your supervisors, then yeah, then that's kind of like a temporary employee for you. Temporary employees are your responsibility. I know that's when you start looking at the document. You go to 1904 section, what is this? Is it recordable or not? Especially if you're on the borderline between being an okay company and oh crap, we got way too many. Our DART rate or anything else, TCR is a little too high, and we can't bid on certain projects, or we can't have a vendor, we can't be a approved vendor list for somebody because our incident rate is too high. That's when you really start nitpicking. Is this really recordable or not?
Lockout, tagout.
Sir.
You mentioned repair and maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
What about a changeover?
Routine changeovers, you do not have to do lockout, tagout. Say if you're running a punch press or a power press, and you're changing out the die on there. As long as you can adequately say you're protecting the workers, you don't have to do lockout, tagout, because that's routine work on that piece of machinery. So the die or the die shoe, you can remove and change out, you're okay. If I was the person doing it, I may not do lockout, tagout, but I would definitely, California, it's called blockout, where you take a steel bar, like a steel bar stock, and you stick it in there in the punch press. Even if that 110 press drops, it's not going to crush its way through a 3-inch thick steel bar, right? Your hands are still safe. You can still pull them out of the way before it crushes your fingers off. That's a good question. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
What about hearing?
What about it?
And hearing protection
Mm-hmm.
and deterioration of hearing with older employees?
Okay. Hearing loss is a natural part of aging. Everybody in this room, over the course of time, is probably going to lose some amount of hearing that you had from the day you were born. That's just a given medical fact. Okay. I'm saying not everybody, but 90% of us are going to happen. For some of us, you get that ringing in the ears called tinnitus. Okay, I've got that in my right ear. It's just constant, annoying, high-pitched ringing or jingling sound. It's normal, right? That is, if you have normal hearing loss attributable to age, that's not considered a recordable incident. Okay? To be recordable, it has to be traced back to some workplace-related accident, incident, or you could call it a lifetime of exposure. Say I've worked for the same company for the last 30 years, this hearing loss may be related to work. You're right, it might be. Okay? The only time you have hearing loss issues is if you've done an audiometric test. I mean, you sent the employee, they've had their hearing test, they have a baseline, and then an annual comes back and says, hey, based on the baseline, my hearing loss is decreased by 10 decibels or more at any one of the 3 frequencies. It's 3,000, 4,000, and 5,000 hertz. In either ear, if I have a decreased hearing, meaning it takes a louder sound for me to hear it, I have what's called a standard threshold shift. If I have that, and it's attributed to work, then that is a recordable work incident. If it's not, then again, you usually have to have a doctor tell you, is this work related, or is this, on the side, this person shoots shotgun. They're on their national skeet team, and they never wear earplugs, and they shoot 200 rounds out of their 12-gauge shotgun 7 days a week, 365 days a year. If I heard that as an employer, I'm like, I am not going to record that incident. I don't care what job that person did at my facility. If that person lost their hearing from shooting shotguns on their own personal time. That'd be my stance, right? And that's the way I would defend that, you know, and I would document that some way and tell OSHA. And then it all comes down to, does OSHA buy off on that? Does OSHA say, yep, that sounds reasonable to me, you're good, or nope, I don't care, it's still work-related, in which case they'd nail you for that. So whether to record or not record is kind of like up to you. You know, some companies say, screw it, I'm going to record it anyway, just to be safe, just to be conservative, even if it's not really work-related. You know, like if somebody dies of a heart attack, you know, if you got an older employee, they're in their late 60s, you know, they chain smoke, they drink like a fish, you know, they came to work one day, they're just walk into the office, they just sat down at their desk and they keel over dead, right? Is it recordable? Technically not. It has nothing to do with work. It's just a symptom that happened at work, so it's not really recordable. But it's a fatality. Should I record it? Should I report it? You know, again, it's not work-related, so technically you don't have to. Some companies are going to say, I don't care if it's work-related or not. I'm calling OSHA for that. I don't want OSHA to come in and say, I understand you had somebody die here and you didn't report it. I'm going to call that a willful violation. Here's your $70,000 fine. Some companies are like, you know, that gets the pucker factor up. There's no way. I'm not doing that. I'm calling OSHA anyway. I will withstand an OSHA inspection because I don't want to take the chance that I can get a willful violation by not reporting a fatality. Even though you don't have to, it's not work-related. Because again, it all depends on what is the OSHA going to decide is or is not work-related. You know, is there something in the workplace? You know, yeah, they just sat down at his desk, but maybe he looked up and saw a naked woman dancing in front of him or something like that or whatever. Like, whoa, and it startled him. Yeah, heart attack. Or some other shock to his system that caused him, you know, to have a heart attack. You know, again, if OSHA can trace it to some work-related incident, yeah, it's work-related and you got to report it. So I know it's a lot of exceptions to the rule, and that's where you really got to have somebody in your company looking at the rules. If you have an incident, look through those rules, the standards very, very carefully to make sure you got everything correct. Anybody else? Usually this is one you get a lot of questions on, because recording incidents or not recording is very near and dear to everybody's heart. Okay, I think that's it. Thanks for coming.